What's going on, everybody? Anthony Cervino here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel with my top 5 players you must start entering Week 11. We're going to start Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams had a tremendous start to the year. He scored a touchdown in every game leading up to Week 8, but he's cooled off since. Back-to-back games without scoring, back-to-back games under 13.2 PPR points, but let's get him back into the must-start category this week. Kyren is still dominating snaps. He's dominating touches, 22.3 touches per game. He's also getting it done as a receiver out of the backfield, getting 9.8% of his team targets. That's 76th percentile amongst qualifying running backs. He's also getting it done in the red area in the past 2 games, despite not scoring. He's had a combined 6 red zone touches, including 2 rushes inside the 5-yard line. Kyren Williams is going to get the get-right matchup this week against the New England Patriots. We know the New England Patriots are better defending the pass than they are defending the run. Right now, New England giving up an average of 24.6 fantasy points per game in PPR to enemy running backs. In fact, they've given up 1,176 yards and 10 touchdowns rushing combined to enemy rushers this season. And outside of containing DeAndre Swift and Breece Hall in 2 of the past 3 games, they've led up at least 18 PPR points to Tony Pollard and to Tank Bigsby in weeks 7 and 9. I think this is a nice spot for Kyren Williams and the Rams offense to get back on track overall in week 11. Next up, we're going to go with David Montgomery. David Montgomery is another rusher who had a tremendous start to the season, but in his past 4 games, he's gone for under 15 PPR points, including 3 games under 12.6. And while he has scored in 2 out of his past 3, he's gone for under 33 yards rushing in 3 out of 4 games since week 7. He is still getting the touches despite an uptick in touches and production from Jahmyr Gibbs. He is getting 15.6 touches per game. He is averaging 2.8 yards after contact, and he is also being targeted on 24.4% of the routes he is running. So while Gibbs is the primary receiver out of the backfield, when Montgomery does get action and go out for a pass route, he is being targeted nearly 25% of the time. I think this is a nice bounce back spot for David Montgomery against Jacksonville. They are the 3rd easiest matchup for enemy running backs. In fact, this is the easiest matchup for Montgomery since week 6, which was the Dallas Cowboys. Since then, they've had Minnesota, Tennessee, Green Bay, Houston. Those are all middle of the pack or better when it comes to fantasy points allowed. They were a little bit tougher matchups than what he's faced earlier this year, but this is the bounce back spot. Jacksonville, this is one of the worst defenses in the NFL. This team overall is reeling. And Jacksonville, while they did play well last week against Minnesota, there was something off about that Minnesota game. Defensively, offensively, it seemed like they played a good game, but they really didn't. I think Minnesota tremendously underperformed. The Lions are not going to do that. I think this is going to be full speed ahead for the Detroit Lions, who I think they're looking to bounce back after 5 interceptions from Jared Goff. I think that offense left points on the field against the Houston Texans. And outside of last week, where Aaron Jones did still manage 12.1 PPR points, if you go back to week 6, 3 different running backs accounted for north of 21 PPR points: Swift, Jacobs, Barkley. And in between, we even saw JaMychal Hasty from the Patriots put up 15. I absolutely love David Montgomery in week 11. We're going to conclude my running backs with Breece Hall. This is another guy, Breece Hall. He's either given us a lot or nothing at all. Breece Hall, since week 4, has accounted for 5 games under 12 PPR points. Since week 8, he hasn't given us more than 12.3 PPR points. 3 straight games that were considered duds. And 2 of those matchups were pretty good against New England and Arizona. One of those was a tough matchup against Houston where the passing game got going, but Breece didn't. Breece Hall needs to play well for this offense to click. And while it looks like the playoff chances are dead in the water for the Jets, they can still make a run. And if they're going to make any type of a run and try to sneak into the 7th wildcard spot, Breece Hall needs to be involved. What's odd about this season with Breece Hall, he is seeing a slight downtick in touches. Right now, he's at 17 and a half touches per game. And last week against Arizona, I get it, it could have been game scripted out. He only counted for 14 total touches. You got to get Breece Hall involved more as a receiver out of the backfield. In the past 3 games, he's seen under 4 targets in each of those games. That's not how the Jets offense works. I get Aaron Rodgers wants to hyper target his guy, Devontae Adams, but Breece Hall needs to be involved as a receiver out of the backfield, not only to exploit his skill set, but it also opens things up for other pass catchers as well. Breece Hall needs to get more involved as a runner, because if you get Breece Hall going, it's going to be really hard to defend the pass. Right now, the Jets offense looks one-dimensional, which is why it is easy for the enemy defense to drop back and let Aaron Rodgers pick them apart. The matchup, Indy, it is good. It is not great. But I think this is a spot where Breece Hall is going to get the touches he needs to return value for his fantasy managers. I get you might be scared to start Breece Hall. I get you might consider starting other guys, but don't do it. In the past 3 games, we've seen Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, and James Cook all account for double-digit PPR points. And Breece Hall, you can make the case he's the most talented of the bunch. Look for Breece Hall to get back on track and pop in Week 11. Remember, folks, if you like content like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the alert icon, so you can be notified anytime we go live to answer your questions or drop content just like this. If you have start, sit, waiver, or trade questions, ask them in the comment section below. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Let's start closing out with my first wide receiver. That is Cedrick TIllman. Cedrick TIllman, going into the bye, was one of the hottest wide receivers in fantasy football. 3 straight games at like 16 PPR points, including at least 19 in weeks 8 and 9. He's also getting hyper-targeted, seeing at least 9 targets in all 3 of those games. 2 of those games going for over 11. He's also given us over 75 yards receiving in all 3 of those games. And in the final 2 going into the bye, he's accounted for 3 total touchdowns. He's getting volume from Jameis Winston. He looks like he is Jameis Winston's number 1 target. And what's amazing is that the Chargers in week 9, where TIllman had 19 and a half PPR points, 75 yards and a touchdown, that was against the Chargers, one of the toughest matchups for enemy wideouts, one of the best defenses in football overall. Now coming out of the bye, you got a smash matchup against the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans Saints, they seem to contain the Atlanta Falcons last week, but 2 different Falcons receivers both had over 14 PPR points in Drake London and Darnell Mooney. The Saints also traded away at the trade deadline their best cornerback, Marshawn Lattimore. That leaves this defense even more vulnerable for wide receivers than it already has been throughout the year. If you need a smash receiver, I believe Cedrick TIllman continues the momentum he entered in the Week 10 bye. I think he comes out strong. I think he's going to continue to be hyper-targeted, and I think he could pop once again against the reeling Saints for his fantasy managers. Finally, we're starting George Pickens. This is a wide receiver who has gotten hot since Russell Wilson taken over as the Steelers quarterback. 3 straight games over 11 PPR points, 2 of which over 20. In fact, in that Week 8 game against the Giants where Pickens only had 11.4, remember, he had a touchdown and another big play called back. He should have gone over 20 in 3 straight, and now he gets Baltimore. Baltimore, the easiest matchup for any wide receiver. No Kyle Hamilton. You can throw all over this Ravens secondary, and the Steelers, this offense is cooking. Russell Wilson is playing really good football, at least from a fantasy football perspective. The Steelers are winning, and they're playing for something. They're playing the Ravens for what could be a division deciding matchup this week. I'm expecting the Ravens to go fire on all cylinders this week. They're going to score points. As good as this defense is, the Ravens, we know, will score the football. And at least this year, the Steelers have the weapons to answer. And with Mike Williams on the other side now, maybe George Pickens doesn't see the top end coverage all the time over the top, and Pickens is good enough to win the contested catch. We know Russell Wilson will put the ball up there and expect George Pickens to come down with it. If the Steelers have a shot at beating the Ravens this week, I'm expecting another monster outing